Hey there, everybody. It's Wiz. So, as you already saw from the title, not the title, but just the opening screenshot, this is far more of a serious video. There's a lot of shit to talk about. You can already see the duration of the video itself. There's a lot of material I'll be covering. Um, I obviously I can't predict the future, but I'm inclined to believe that I might get pretty emotional in this. Um, this is just some shit that's been surfacing the last few months, and I'm not doing this, as some means of justification. Um, it's because it's been on my mind for the last few months. It's a way of chronicling um, just what's taking place. And yeah, it's just because in theory, right, 48 hours from now, I could have a seizure or something could happen to me mentally, right, to the degree that I develop Alzheimer's, not Alzheimer's, but like amnesia, and I forget everything. The memories that I've been able to cling on to. Um, it's just, I feel like if I don't talk about this now, and if something were to happen to me mentally and I lost all my memories, and then I, you know, was back to a normal state, I won't be able to cling on to those as a means of comfort. So there is, again, I don't know how long this is going to go on for. It could go on for some time, but yeah, we'll just get started. I already have my list right in front of me. We're going to be going into intimate details. Obviously, you guys have already seen, and gals have already seen the timestamps. So you can click around if you want, but there's a lot of material to go over. And like I said, I'm just speaking from the heart. It's also to digitally archive everything. So I can maybe look back on this in case I lose my memory ever in the future. But so I have been dealing with just a big bag of shit for the longest time. Just my personal life, but just one specific thing has really been getting to me emotionally. And that's why this week and even today, being honest, Thursday, February 8th, I probably won't be streaming again. It's been this subject that I eventually will be talking about. It's been drilled into my head for like every waking second for the past 4 months or so. Even just like a week ago, I chatted with my sister about it privately because who better to talk to than somebody who, went through, the experiences I did in my childhood, right? So, yeah, I guess I'll start out by saying this. Not just for this video, but every video that I've basically ever made. I want to thank each and every person who's ever left a comment and has said something like, hey, this is awesome. Thanks for doing this. Or even just leaving a comment on the AI battle matches or any video in general, because it's a very comforting thing for me to know that I've been able to make someone else's day from a completely different walk of life. Um, it's, like I said, I feel as if I'm fulfilled, or it's a rewarding experience to know something that I created was able to make someone else's day. And like I said, I just want to thank every single person who's ever left a comment, or I was able to just, if they had a bad day, able to come home from work, watch a video of mine, even if it was for 25 seconds. And yeah, like I said, I want to thank every single person because it's a slight comfort. It's the one thing, even if it's just as a hobby, it reminds me of kind of what I was like for the best 2 years of my life. I would say September 2005, the start of eighth grade, until October 2007, after the first quarter of my sophomore year. Those of Because outside of that time frame, those 2.1 years or whatever, inside mentally, I feel as if I've been dead. I feel like I have just been like a living corpse. Like a lot of this is of my own self doing, but there's also, how do I say it? And I'm just looking at it now. A lot of it has also probably contributed to just my mental mindset, or just the way in which I process and think about things. Um, And I'm not using this like entirely as an excuse, but I do believe it has had an impact in terms of my mindset, my behavior, the way I think about things, the way I process information, my mannerisms, my way of speaking, my behavior, everything. So as you've seen from the list of topics, I have sought, mental, or I've sought therapy in the past, and just throughout my life, I've been diagnosed with something called PDDNOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. Um, there used to be a broader category of autism, and it's been broken down into I've been diagnosed with a smaller thing called Aspergers. It's basically those, not necessarily with like mental defects. It's kind of like there's the degree of special education for students for like mental retardation where they can't think about they can't think for themselves. They're drooling at the mouth. It's profuse, like they can't even concoct a thought, where there's just such a degree, such an impairment. When it comes to me with Asperger's, it's like, I guess it's just behavioral analysis, because that's what I had to go through as a kid. I was considered special education, but I wasn't like mentally retarded, so to speak. It's not like I lost the ability to think about things. It's like my social skills, social understanding was diminished, and this isn't something that I had control over. But from what I understand, as a kid, I had a seizure. I don't know, maybe 1, 2, 3 years old, when I was really young, and it fucked up my neurological endings, the way in which I process information, the way in which I think about things, the way in which I handle situations, social norms, so on and so forth. And like I said, I'm not using the fact that I've been diagnosed with a mental disorder as an excuse for all of my behavior, but it definitely has. Uh, it's definitely had a huge impact. It's had a stunted growth, so to speak. If the average person tripped 27 times, I would trip 96 before it clicked, so to speak. Um, but yeah, it's like I said, it's played a huge part as to why. Again, just a couple of weeks ago, right, I hit 32 years old, and even though May of last year at 31, I got my associate's degree. I feel like when it comes to school, like just our education system, it felt like throughout middle school, high school, everybody was just kind of funneling me through the education system to give me a fucking diploma, because that's all the teachers and the administrators, so on and so forth, gave a shit about. Because to me, I was just a number, just a statistic. So my graduating class of 2010 of my public high school, right? There's less than 1,000 people. So that means every student makes up at least 0.1% of that graduation rate. And the higher that rate, the bigger the fucking bonuses are for the administrators, the teachers. That's why people are just funneled through a system. I just kind of felt like as if everybody was swept up in a tide and I merely went against it. And it's kind of funny because I know that's like a vague quote from Delita from Final Fantasy Tactics, but yeah, it's just I was always like anti-culture, I guess you can say. I was a defiant fucking teenager. But yeah, it's just a lot of shit has happened. And, I know that this aspect isn't exclusive to me, but there are a lot of people who have jobs right now in which are unfulfilling, or they're individuals that they believe and they know that they're overqualified for what they're particularly doing, and it's demoralizing. Obviously, I'm in the aspect now, but that's just because when it comes to the job front, I may have put in like 160 applications, give or take, in the last 8 months or so, the last 9 months. But that's not a lot. I mean, that's like one or two a day. I could really be sitting down, putting seven in a day, an hour's worth of my free time, and get like 50 jobs a week, because they're out there. It's just, like I said, I've been really slow on it, but also what's been kind of inhibiting me is a bunch of other things I'm going to be talking about too that go into my personal life, just memories and a bunch of stuff. But my point being is this: there have been instances in the past where even though my life has been complete shit outside of 2.1 years, right? Um, September of 2005 to October 2007. Um, the fact that I had a wonderful time in that short period is the reason, well, And that's not just the reason, but there is somebody that I went to high school with. I graduated in 2010 on my public school. He graduated from the private school in 2008. I'm not going to name his name, but the point being is this person was a bright and brilliant individual. 35 on the ACT, almost a perfect score, multiple AP courses. For those who don't know, in the United States, AP means advanced placement. They're actually college level courses you can take in high school and actually apply for college credit. This person was incredibly intelligent, um, was part of many events, high school band. I knew this person well because I was a part of that band with him for 2 years. Part of the play, was in a bunch of co-curricular, extracurricular activities. He was a prodigy, so to speak. And the reason why I'm bringing him up is because even though my life is, for the most part, has been complete shit, that person with the 35 in the ACT, he ended up killing himself. Um, he um, he went to fucking Columbia University, an Ivy League school. That's how bright and brilliant this person is. And it shows even someone of that stature is vulnerable to mental health or to mental weaknesses. And my point being is, I don't want to become him. Despite the shit that I've gone through in my life, um, I don't ever want to be weak enough mentally to get to that point. And allegedly, this was because a girl turned him down, broke up with him. 45 minutes later, he hung himself in his apartment. And that has really shook me to the core. And I don't ever want to get to that low. I don't want to become that person. I had tremendous respect for them up until I found out about that information. So again, even someone that bright and brilliant is vulnerable to mental health. And it really it really has gotten to me because, like I said, I don't want to be in that spot. I think it's just the easy way out of dealing with life. I've dealt with my own bag of shit. I've been kind of a lone wolf my whole life. Um, so yeah, that's gonna bring me to again, the beginning of eighth grade, September 2005, when the school year started, till the first quarter of my sophomore year, October 2007. Roughly that 25-month window, that was the best period of my life. And after the first quarter of my sophomore year, that quarter, I had a 3.621 GPA. It was like the highest I ever had. That's almost an A minus average. Things went fucking downhill at that point. I became, in terms of my personality, I was incredibly arrogant. I was incredibly egotistical. I got obsessed with a bunch of bullshit. It was honors and AP courses. Honors are like more difficult classes, but like if you got an A, for example, in an honors course, it would be considered a 4.4 GPA versus a um, versus if you took a regular course, it was a 4.0. So it was a way to boost your GPA. It was a more accelerated class. I got obsessed with that bullshit, honors and AP classes. And I remember making a big stink about going to my public school because I'd take more APs. My point is, I was incredibly arrogant and egotistical. And I just, emotionally speaking, I went fucking downhill. I made a fucking fool of myself like an idiot. I opened up social media with Facebook. Like I said, I went down a really fucking dark path. And my grades crippled to the degree I used gaming as a um, playing video games, that is, I use that as a coping mechanism. It's parallel to someone, being a smoker or drinking to get rid of their problems. My grades deteriorated sophomore year. After about 5 weeks in the junior year, I was basically told to leave the private school. And it made sense too, because now that I'm a junior in high school, I'm starting to become an upperclassman. I was leading a bad impression, and they already dealt with my shit sophomore year, and they didn't want to go through that rodeo again. So I totally understand. But yeah, I was an incredibly arrogant bastard um, throughout the rest of junior year and senior year. Senior year was the fucking worst. I ended up being a fucking super senior. What I mean by that is, it was like probably the first week of the next school year that I didn't end up graduating because I was a lethargic, lazy piece of shit that didn't take my online courses. I took it like that last week or whatever. I had the whole summer to do it. I was in an incredibly dark spot. It was the lowest of lows. And, I obviously, like if I had to give myself like an analogy, it felt like as if I dug myself a hole, but I was 90% of the way to digging myself all the way to fucking China. I had just 10% left before I dug to the other side of the world. And because I dug a hole so fucking deep, ever since then, hitting the lowest of lows, I've slowly but surely climbed up that fucking hill. And I had personal demons with school. As I mentioned, about feeling like as if I was funneled through conceptually, right? I was arrogant, I was egotistical. Um, and in the process, I ended up hurting people. My mindset at that time was with the people that I was in high school with after 2007. It was what the fuck. This is my mindset back then as a 15, 16-year-old teenager. What the fuck is the point of having relationships with these people if it's all just going to be thrown away once we all graduate from high school, if I never end up seeing them again? Well, I discovered just a few weeks ago that the reason why I'd want to have relationships with those people, or rather bond with them, have good times with them, is so that I could use those memories that I had with those people. I could recall them in times of comfort, in times of need. Because again, in that 2-year window, September 2005 to October 2007, I've been clinging on to those memories, so to speak, with the people I was associated with. And yeah, outside of that very short window, I truly have been dead. I feel dead. I feel like I'm in a catatonic state. And whenever I put videos up on YouTube and I see your guys' comments or I'm commentating on the battles themselves, that's just a glimpse. That's just a taste of what I was actually like. I mean, that's genuine. That's me. That's my true personality. It brings a light to my day, especially just people engaging in conversation with me. That's what I was like every waking second of those 2 years. I was at peace with myself. I had a state of contentment, I guess you could say. That's what I'm ultimately striving for, is to be. I want to get back to that same place, and maybe even ascend greater heights to that same level of happiness. And I think the one final barrier left before I get there, and I believe it's doable because I started 3 years ago with my journey at school, getting my associate's degree. The next step now is just getting a job in the fucking field. And that's just a matter of me getting off my lazy ass and applying for jobs. And even if I have to start at the bottom of the barrel as a 32-year-old man versus maybe the 20 to 22-year-old counterpart, I'm okay with that. This is my lack of action and my arrogance and egotism when I was younger. I'm glad I went through it at a younger age versus being older now. But yeah, now I'm going to be getting to some of the deep shit and I might be tearing up over it. So I not only do I want to talk about in those 2 years, eighth grade, ninth grade, and the first quarter of my sophomore year, not only do I want to talk about eighth grade, that was the best year of my life of those 2.1 years or whatever, the first quarter of my sophomore year. But there's also somebody I want to talk about in particular. You already saw it at the beginning of the screen. It was my childhood neighbor. My childhood neighbor is somebody that it wasn't until well, it was a few months ago. My aunt brought up her mom in conversation saying, "Oh yeah, she's watching the grandkids." I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" "Oh yeah, uh that's your neighbor's daughter's children." The neighbor. Like I said, I don't want to reveal her first name. It's a matter of privacy, and this is my story to tell. Um, but let me just say this in regards to when I brought up the whole at the beginning when I brought up the fact that I was diagnosed with autism, Aspergers, so on and so forth, because at that time we're talking like the late 90s, early 2000s, special education programs really weren't as accessible as they are today. I went to a different elementary school compared to her. I went to a school that was probably 5, 6 miles away versus the one that was zero point 0.7 miles away. The one that was zero point 0.7, I guess they didn't have the resources, quote unquote, or the needs to fulfill uh, to address my concerns. And before I actually talk about my neighbor, I just want to mention one thing about the whole Asperger's thing that got me so fucking mad. So throughout school, I was in something called an IEP, an individual education plan, those with quote unquote special needs. And just because I was categorized in that field, again, this is not something I asked for. I had a seizure as a kid and it fucked everything up. But the point being is this: I kind of felt like as if I was always subpar. I was taking out of like a communications class and put into a special ed class for behavioral analysis. It was a class called SDC, Student Development Center. And I always felt like as if I was subpar. It always felt like the approach that the special education teachers had was that I was some sort of like mathematical equation that needed to be fucking solved. And that's why I was just so infuriated with those classes in particular. I always felt like I was never good enough. And I've never told anybody about that throughout school. Maybe people had their suspicions, maybe they didn't. And again, you got to remember that the late 90s, early to mid 2000s, you know, teenagers did not understand this shit. I mean, this was just like deep in the history books. Like you wouldn't know this without actually going out of your way to do research. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up because despite the fact that I went to a different elementary school compared to my neighbor, I'm certain it never crossed her mind. But growing up as kids, I went to her house numerous times when I was in elementary school. I played. The oldest memory I have of her, um, she gave me a bracelet as a gift. I don't remember if it was like a fake bracelet like she bought from a store or if it was a real bracelet that she made with like real seashells and she gave it to me. That's the oldest memory I have of her. 5, 6, maybe 7 years old. I don't remember exactly how old. And the reason why she's significant to me is because this isn't exactly a Peter Parker and Mary Jane story, right? Not next door neighbors. It was a Peter Parker, and then there's a neighbor, set of neighbors in between, and then Mary Jane's on the other side. But she was the first person outside of my family that ever showed me an act of kindness. And her kindness is unparalleled compared to any other person's. And it wasn't just until a few months ago that that was the primary reason as to why back then I fell in love with her. And I did ask her out freshman year, again, during that prime time of my life. Um, but yeah, when I did that, I was at my private school when I was truly happy. She was at the public school. I when I asked her out, I wrote a, you got to remember something. This is in 2007, February 2007. So this is before smartphones existed. If you wanted to text, it was like $1 a text. Um, so technology was slightly different. I wrote her a personal handwritten letter. I walked to her house 7 degrees below zero. I handed the letter, fortunately, to her little brother. I went on a trip to St. Louis, Missouri for 5 days. She gave me her letter back. She turned me down and mentioned the fact that we went to different public high schools. 10 minutes after I got done reading her letter out at 9 o'clock, I called her up. I said, and I remember what I said word for word. I just made it very brief. I said, hey, it's me. Just want to let you know I got done reading your letter 10 minutes ago. Wanted to let you know that I'm not angry or upset. As far as I'm concerned, it's not the end of the world. There are plenty of fish in the sea, and I appreciate the fact that you took the time to respond back to me. That's what I told her word for word after she rejected me. And in terms of, like, she only said one word in response, but she sounded pleasantly surprised. She said, yeah, like that. Like she sounded happy. Um, but yeah, so this was again about 5 days later, February 19th, 2007. So nearly 6 months later, her parents invited my family over for dinner. So again, with us being neighbors, being incredibly close, I wouldn't say just our parents, but more so our mothers in particular, even to this day, are very good friends with one another. So it's also not new because her parents invited my family over for dinner previously too. And the point being is this. Um, Again, this, so we're talking about August 2007. I Her parents invited my family. My sister left to go spend time with her boyfriend. Her younger fucking brother of 3 years younger than us went to go spend time with her girlfriend, or his girlfriend, I should say, excuse me. And then eventually I was left alone on the bottom floor of her house alongside her and her best friend. Her best friend knew me throughout all of middle school. those 3 years, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. So the main thing that has been running through my head for these past 3 months, the main crux, is when I was alone, just with those two, her and her best friend, in the bottom floor of her house in the basement. So I'll tell you what I did. As soon as her younger brother left, I went out the sliding glass door on the bottom floor and I left immediately myself. I kind of, I guess you could say, ran away like a coward. Before I headed out, I can't remember which of the two asked me this. It was either her or her best friend, one of the two. They asked me, um, they asked me if I was still going back to my private school. I told them yes. I mentioned the fact that I had 3 books I needed to do for summer reading, which I did. And I also mentioned to them, um, besides the 3 books for summer reading, I also had band practice because this was on a Sunday night. Monday the next morning, Monday through Friday that week, and the following week, I had 80 hours of band practice. So again, it's like 40 hours a week. It's like going to a job. And you got to remember, as 15-year-olds, they didn't understand the concept of, like, working a full-time schedule. And when I told them that, their jaws dropped because they had no fucking clue, again, the magnitude. But my point being is this: I was in an incredibly uncomfortable position. So even though that was even though that reason was there, like, based on my body language and the fact that I left immediately afterwards, um, I ran away like a coward because my mindset, as I mentioned before, back then was, what's the point of being, like, striking up a conversation, a friendship, a relationship with these people if I may never talk to them again? Because again, we went to different schools at that time. She was at the public school, I was at the private school, and I've been replaying that scenario in my head over and over and over, obsessing about it. And I wish I could go back in time, even to this day, whether I decided to go back to my public school or even if it was that moment, I was still going to my private school. And I regret simply just not sitting down and having a conversation with them. Um, and just being on good terms. Because when I told her that, again, that I appreciated the fact she responded back to me, because I brought up a couple of memories of our past as to why I ended up falling for her. And she definitely seemed appreciative of that. And throughout that night, before I was left alone with the two of them, based on her body language, my neighbor that is, her body language, her behavior, like, she was blushing and shit. She went up the stairs. Like, I was on the bottom floor. She ran up the stairs with her best friend. You got to remember something. As a teenage girl, we had not seen or spoken to each other in 6 months. It had been so freaking long. Not only had it been so long, but the dynamic, the relationship we had with one another is different because, again, we were childhood neighbors. And it was the first time being at her house after asking her out in 6 months. And yeah, she was probably somewhat embarrassed, somewhat uncomfortable. Her best friend was there. And I don't believe it's coincidence, but I believe she was there as, like, moral support. And I'm presuming they both wanted to talk to me just to make it a little bit easier for that transition. But yeah, just the reason why I'm giving these details is I'm inclined to believe that I left things on good terms with them and that they desperately wanted to talk to me. Now, it's probably wishful thinking. Maybe if I told them I was going to go back to the public school, maybe she would have confessed. Maybe they wanted to be friends with me because, like I said, when I made my phone call and said, hey, I appreciated the fact that you responded back to me because I took the rejection so well, I think they just wanted to, like, at the very least, have a conversation. And just, like I said, I think I left things on good terms, and I bet they felt that same way too. And I just kind of blew it like an idiot. And I didn't do anything to hurt her, so to speak. It's just I was incredibly dismissive. My mindset at that time was, why bother talking to her if I may never see her again, or if it's another 8, 9, 10 months, right? Why bother, like, trying to have? And when I say relationship, I mean just like a friendship, be on good terms. I was just incredibly. You got to remember, I was a 15-year-old boy at that point, 15 and a half. So things have definitely changed, but I just regret simply not having a conversation with her and her best friend, just being on good terms with them and just talking things out, summoning the courage like I did to ask her out. But this And again, so again, February 2007, I ask her out. 6 months later, her parents invite my family over for dinner. And I've just been replaying that scenario in my head of wishing I just went back in time. Again, whether I was able to go back in time far enough so that I can go to my public school sophomore year and finish up high school with those people, that started to mean something to me. Or if I can only rewind time far enough, I was still in my private school just to simply talk, even though I was nervous as all hell. But yeah, it's just so again, that's around August 2007. Now, again, in my arrogant state after October 2007, I got obsessed with honors and AP courses. My attitude changed. I was incredibly arrogant, egotistical. Again, as a teenager, I was a fucking idiot at this point. But February 2008, the following year, I gave her another fucking Valentine, like a dumbass. And, when you ask a girl out, she turns you down. You shouldn't be giving her a fucking Valentine the next year like an idiot, right? Again, I don't even remember all the reasons why, but when I did, gave her my phone number, she called back, mentioned that she was uncomfortable, and I believe at that point in time, she also had a boyfriend. Like I said, I was a fucking imbecile. I ended up hurting her as a result. And about 5 months later, in July of 2008, her parents had a 50th surprise birthday party for my mom. And even though I did apologize to her over the phone 5 months later, I fractured the relationship I once had with her. I used to be on good terms and I ruined it like a fucking idiot. And the main crux of all of this, like all these emotions that I got pent up inside, is that I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for hurting her. It just sucks because this is the one person I truly started to care about. That first person so far that I truly fell in love with. And it just sucks to used to be on good terms with somebody. I act like an imbecile. And even though I apologize, the relationship I have with her forever now is fractured. And I can never get that back, what I once had, because I was a fucking idiot. And this relationship that I had with her, this is the crux of what's been going on. Even like these past few streams or whatever, even at work, just this has been what I've been fixating on these past 3, 4 months. And it all kind of stemmed from my aunt bringing up, hey, your former neighbor now has kids or whatever, right? When my aunt just brought that up in conversation because of some like dog sitting or whatever, 3, 4 months ago, it's gotten to me. Every waking second these past 4 months or so, I've just she's been on my mind 24/7, and it's not healthy. It's one thing to think about people in the past you used to associate with. It's another matter to obsess over it. And with my previous therapist, there's a difference between it's normal to have these thoughts, but it's when it becomes intrusive to the degree that you act upon them. And I would never do something like that ever again. I never want to hurt her. Right now, my mindset is I wish I could just wave a magic wand and erase our memories of each other forever. That's what I wish I could do. And unfortunately, I can't do that. But this big bag of shit is what I've been going through for these past 4 fucking months, even these past few streams. Like it's just been on my mind as I've been commentating on some of these matches as an example. And that's why it's just been incredibly difficult. It's a massive distraction. Um, and this isn't something where it's like, oh, well, Wiz, you can just get over it. It's not something you just flip a switch. Again, there are many memories I have with her. Um, Fond memories, even when we were in elementary school and kids, right? I mentioned the thing about her giving me seashells, like a seashell bracelet as a gift. The first person showed me kindness. Third and seventh grade, we both used to have private piano lessons with our teacher at my home and her home. I grew up with this person, even though we went to different elementary schools. She's the one that understood me the best. She's the one that She's the one that saw the best in people, regardless of the circumstances, whether rumors, whether people did weird shit or not. That's the thing. She and I would be the only two people that got off of our bus stop. Seventh and eighth grade, just the two of us walking home, side by side. Well, I was on one side of the road, she was on the other. And a memory in seventh grade, I was probably 12, 13 steps ahead of her on the bus. It started to lightly rain. She was in a green signature coat. She ran past me or did like a light jog or skip past me. And as she did that when it was raining, I could hear her laughing under her breath. I could hear her just like giggling as if like she was embarrassed or something like that. And I just looked back and I said, what the hell's so funny about trying to get home? Walking in the rain, you're embarrassed because you're skipping? I don't know. Eighth grade. So this is before a year before I asked her out. I didn't really understand why at the time, but I gave her a Valentine when we all got off the bus and no one else was looking around at the top of the hill. She seemed pretty receptive to it. And yeah, it's just, you can tell that this is an important person in my life. And again, it was her unparalleled kindness is what I fell in love with. Um, Throughout middle school, I was always kind of repelled from being around her. I was always like drawing attention to myself. So the typical acquaintance for personal space, I'd give them 3, 4 feet, in terms of comfortable distance. With her, I felt like I had to be 5 or 6 feet away just because of the nature of us being childhood neighbors. And yeah, it wasn't until freshman year hit and I was at my private school, she was at the public school, that I missed having her in my life, even if we didn't interact with each other all that much. And yeah, that eighth grade year, when I gave her that Valentine, when no one else was looking, a part of it was because due to the nature of me being extra shy towards her, it was my way at that time of saying, thanks for getting along with me. Thanks for being a friendly acquaintance. And it was also another way of saying, thanks for being a part of my life, even if I can't really understand why you're important to me. And you got to recall that it wasn't until just these past 4 months or so, because I've been thinking about her, why I've done a deep dive into my feelings towards her. Um, but yeah, this is somebody that I deeply cared about. And it just sucks because I used to be on good terms with her and I was an arrogant bastard. And I can never get that back, what I once had. Um, Again, I was an arrogant teenager, but it just sucks. There are a bunch of other people in middle school or eighth grade, I should say, that I got really close to. But the difference with those people is that I didn't go out of my way to hurt them. So I can live with myself, even if even if I drifted apart from all of them. And I'll get to them in just a moment. But yeah, my neighbor, it sucks. Somebody that I truly, the first person so far that I truly fell in love with. And it's just gone. And it would be inappropriate for me to like ever contact her again. And honestly, at this point, as I mentioned, I wish I could just erase our memories of each other. I don't feel like as if I have the right to ever speak or talk to her again. And I did talk to my sister about this again a few weeks ago or a couple weeks ago, and she told me to just simply move on. She doesn't understand the magnitude of the situation for me because growing up, because of my actions, I didn't have, even to this day, I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone that I can like consult or I can talk to in my personal life. The only thing I have are my memories and my own thoughts to get me through all this. And the fond memories I have, not just of my neighbor, but those who were closest to me at the end of eighth grade, those are the things that have been able to comfort me. This 2 year window, that's what's been able to truly comfort me and help me get through all these hard times. Because I know it's possible. It's such a long fucking road. Um, but yeah, so now I'll be talking about middle school, eighth grade. So eighth grade, ninth grade in the first quarter of my sophomore year. Eighth grade was the best year of my life. Things progressively got better and better. At the beginning of eighth grade, I wanted to go to this private school because I'm not going to go into the details about it, but sixth and seventh grade were pretty bad experiences for me overall. So I wanted to start all over. At the beginning of eighth grade, my mindset was I wanted to start all over. I wanted to start a new life going to this private school. I had to score well enough on the entrance exams. I guess all my scores were good except my English scores. I guess they were slightly lacking. Plus, they were concerned about the fact that I had my, special ed classes or whatever, that they wouldn't have had the resources. Had it not been for my English teacher in eighth grade, I probably wouldn't have gotten into the private school. And so I am indebted to him greatly because he wrote me a letter of recommendation, scored well enough, but I was able to get there. And so again, because of the bad experiences at the beginning of sixth and seventh grade, sixth grade I got bullied. Seventh grade, I got betrayed by somebody that used to be my friend. I brought a switchblade to school even if I wasn't supposed to, and I got ratted out by that person. And when that happened, and I got suspended for that last week of middle school, or last week of seventh grade, I kind of closed myself out to the rest of the world. I was extra shy. I never showed people my true personality, what I was actually like. But eighth grade that year, things progressively got better and better. And there were a handful of people, and I'll mention them by first names. It was my friend Brendan at that point. Then there were four other ladies in particular. Laura, Michaela, Melanie, and Rita. The thing about that year is those are the five people who were the closest to me. And they, how do I say it? It was my first year meeting all of them. I never met them in sixth or seventh grade before. So whether they knew about my past, whether they knew about my history or not, it didn't stop them from judging me. Or they didn't judge me, but it didn't stop them from interacting with me from the person that they saw. My past was something that, even if they knew about it, they didn't give a shit. They saw me for who I was and how I was able to behave. As I mentioned before, the way in which I interact, like commentating some of these AI battles, my mentality, my mindset, my personality was like that every waking second of eighth and ninth grade, especially, and more so towards those I got really close to. Brendan, Laura, Michaela, Melanie, and Rita. Laura and Michaela, I probably knew them the best of those four ladies because they were both part of the middle school band, right? I was a baritone / euphonium player. Laura was either a clarinet and or bassoon player. Michaela was a trumpet player. But besides that, Michaela and Laura were also part of the swim team, which I was a part of too. So at the middle school, they didn't have like a boys and girls swim team. It was a co-ed, so they were combined. So I got to know them through that. And as I said, as the years progressively got better and better and better, as the year progressively got better and better, I got extremely close with them. And that last day of middle school I was, so the details, periods 1 and 2, the very beginning of the day, I was sitting in my teacher's classroom, Mr. Saruko, with his habanero peppers, and I was sitting on my table alongside Michaela, Melanie, and Rita. The three of them and I, well, the four of us sat together either at the exact same table or throughout the year. I don't exactly remember the details, but it was definitely those last couple of months, and I bonded with them. And I just remember the warmth and the atmosphere I felt. Because like I said, I want to go a little further back in history. So when middle school started, at my public middle school, I mentioned before about how I went to a different elementary school. The elementary school that I went to, most of the people from that elementary school went to two other middle schools. Let's just call middle schools 1 and 2. The one I went to was middle school 3. Nobody that I went to elementary school with went to middle school 3 alongside me. So I had to start all over, and I didn't know anybody. It was difficult for me to make friends. But yeah, 8th grade, it took 3 years before I felt like most people started to understand me and accept me for who I was, even if I had a little bit of weirdness to me due to my, social awkwardness with autism and whatnot. Even if people didn't know about it, they accepted me nevertheless. Those 2 years, 6th and 7th grade, I didn't have a last day of middle school. I got suspended, as I mentioned, that last week bringing a switchblade. 6th grade, I got bullied. I didn't have a last day. but I did for 8th grade. And even though Brendan didn't sign my 8th grade yearbook, I did celebrate after the last day of middle school. I did some things with him, which I'll get to in a moment. But on that last day, when I was experiencing the warmth and the atmosphere, laughing it up, having a great time alongside Michaela, Melanie, and Rita, we were all celebrating the fact they were getting done with middle school, going to have a great summer. But, going to high school, they all knew I was going to St. Thomas, but damn, I said the school, but in any case, they, how do I say it? Towards the end of the school day, like the last 45 minutes to an hour, I was in the lunchroom. The tables were folded up. There were probably about 150 to 200 people. Those four and plenty of other people, probably 2 to 3 dozen people signed my yearbook, but those four signed it. Laura, Michaela, Melanie, and Rita. Laura got really close to me to the degree that a couple of my classmates, my male classmates, commented saying that they thought she had a thing for me. She took it upon herself on numerous occasions to compliment me on my swim meets. I never got less than 3rd place. So I was always bronze or above. There were quite a couple of races I won. I was in Sangam Taekwondo at some sort of public event outside of school. She complimented me, even though I dropped my weapon like an idiot for one of my competitions. I kicked ass in sparring. But no, Laura took it upon herself to get really close to me. And it was like the closest thing I guess a guy and a girl can be without crossing that line of being in a relationship. And I don't exactly remember, and it's unfortunate because, well, I'll get to it in a moment, but for my 8th grade yearbook, she wrote a lengthy message, and at the end of it, she wrote her phone number, and she said, "Keep in touch, love you." And then she wrote a shortened version of her last name with a couple of hearts. So that was Laura's message, and like I said, she really got close to me. Michaela, she wrote a lengthy message too, and at the end of it, she wrote something that's had a huge impact on me, even to this day. She wrote, at the very end, she wrote, "Never change," with like 7, 8, 9 exclamation points after the fact. And I never thought that someone would think so highly of me to write something of that magnitude. For someone to think that I was good enough to be told that, to never change, to leave such a great first impression, to have words of that scale, for someone to be so thoughtful. As you can tell, I'm kind of tearing up already. It's just, that really means a lot. But as for Melanie, she is more of a friend of Michaela's, but she sat on my science class with Mr. Saruko. She commented about a guy named, well, Melanie, just like Michaela, she also had a very cheery, bubbly personality, someone that anyone would want to be around. Like, just, again, she gave off this vibe, this impression that anybody would want to, like, just talk to her, engage in conversation. Someone that's just pleasant. But she talked about, I think, somebody that she maybe had a crush on. The guy's name was Evan. She talked about his 8th grade soccer picture for the A team. And she talked about, and I'm using her words, it looked like he was about to murder somebody. Like, in a good way. Like, they all had these, like, everybody on that soccer team had like these super serious faces. And Evan had this thing too. It looked like he had a death stare, like, really, like Melanie said, very cheery, bubbly personality. And then as for Rita, she actually, again, even though it was only my first year, she was kind of like the quiet one, like myself. But I guess you could say her true personality, much like my own, she and the other four, Brendan, Laura, Michaela, and Melanie, they all kind of bred out my true personality. I was able to be myself. I was jovial and upbeat, but she kind of wrote a more generic message too. I mean, Melanie wrote, "Hey, you're a great guy, Austin." And then Rita, she kind of said a similar thing. I'm trying to remember because I don't have the yearbook anymore, and I unfortunately threw it out like a dumbass. But she wrote, "It was great getting to know you," and she wrote her full name out, Margarita, like the drink. So those are the four closest people. There are a couple more people who signed it, and it was quite comforting. Let's just put it that way. There's a guy named Sam. He played either the alto or the tenor saxophone, one of the two, and he wrote a message saying, Austin, looking good. This was in regards to Laura's message. He wrote like an arrow. He drew an arrow and he said, Austin, he was an acquaintance, Austin, looking good. Uh, I'm not lying. He said, Austin, I know this word for word. He said, Austin, looking good. You're a chick magnet. You ought to hook up with Laura. She digs you. I can tell. Word for word, he wrote that. And then there's another person named Ryan. I used to, I actually got suspended in seventh grade because I was planning on fighting Ryan after school, and I used to hate him. Um, but towards the end of eighth grade, towards the end of the year, um, patched things up, and he began to accept me, even if I had a little bit of weirdness towards me. And he didn't actually write his name in my yearbook. He wrote the word samurai, and he spelt it incorrectly. He wrote Samary. Probably just a spelling issue. He probably, and at that time, I didn't know how to spell it either. Samurai. But in any case, there's some backstory to it. Because I was in Sangam Taekwondo, I was taking classes. He called me a ninja. And because I was playing Final Fantasy Tactics at that point, I said, I'm not a ninja. I'm not a weak little bitch that does 72 individual hits. I told Ryan in my homeroom class that I was a samurai, that I one-shotted people. He was so fascinated by that, he ended up calling me a samurai throughout the rest of the year. And yeah, so it was just a memorable thing. So those are half a dozen messages that were left in my yearbook out of 2 to 3 dozen. But for the closest people, two acquaintances, a lot of other people just wrote the acronym HAGS, HAGS, which is an acronym for Have a Great Summer. Um, but no, the thing is, that year, that day, and it still is, the last day of middle school, it is the happiest day of my life. And it was the first time I ever felt accepted and loved by others, outside of family, of course. And I'm striving, even to this day, to get back to that same kind of point of contentment, being at peace with myself, and with who I am as a person. And yeah, I want to get back to that point. And the day's not even over, as I mentioned with Brendan. Um, so this is, the last day of school. It was around 2 o'clock or so. I don't know, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. About 2 hours later, I ended up going to some public park because my sister had a soccer game, and there were like other games going on at the same time. And in the sidelines, when I was walking through the fields, um, I ended up seeing Michaela and Melanie again. After heartfelt goodbyes and farewells and everything, and I was going to my private school. I ended up seeing them again, and it was a pleasure because maybe that was a sign. If there is a God, maybe that was a sign from Him saying, "Don't go." But I was there with Brendan, and he looked like, how do you know how to say? He seemed like as if he was shocked that I was chatting with Melanie and Rita, or not Melanie and Michaela. He looked shocked because it's like, wow, you're talking with girls, Austin? Holy shit! But like I said, because they were able to reawake, they reawoke my true personality. I was comfortable being around them. But yeah, and then after that Halo, sorry, after that soccer game for my sister, Brendan, a bunch, along with my younger cousin, his neighbor, and then a couple other classmates named Scott and Ian, the six of us had a local multiplayer Halo party. So two TVs hooked up. It was a 3-on-3 action. We did 1v1s. I got my ass kicked by Scott playing Halo 2. No shields on, shooting each other in the head with battle rifles. Um, and this was going late into the night, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And I remember Scott's parents, Ian's parents, they were looking at the backside of our yard, our deck, because I lived in a pretty big house, and the view from the deck is incredibly gorgeous. Um, Fire pit, a bunch of mulch, giant boulders. My parents had a massive reconstruction project when I was younger, but like I said, that's what that last day of middle school is like for me. Feeling accepted and loved by the people that I left behind. Um, and yeah, I mean, I went through an exercise just even like about a couple of months ago where I wrote notes to my former self in an alternate reality. If he was somehow able to see the things that I wrote for him, the things I've talked to you about, not to fuck up and not be arrogant, egotistical, ignore honors and AP courses. In regards to my neighbor, not to fuck up that relationship. I mean, I went through these exercises already, but that it hasn't changed anything. And as I said, I know I'm kind of going all over the place, rambling about this shit, but this is everything that has been transpiring, that's been, going through my mind, grinding through those gears. And like I said, I wish I could go back in time, have that conversation with my neighbor and her best friend, and everything that I just got done explaining to you about that last day in middle school. I wish I had the courage to just simply talk to them about that. Because they knew the people I was talking about, right? Brendan, Michaela, Laura, Melanie, Rita, they knew who they were. They knew who I was. Not on a personal level, but again, the nature of a relationship with classmates is different than somebody, that doesn't know you. So it's different if I were to talk to, if I were to talk to these things, with my parents or my sister or whatever it is, than just actually talk with people who went to school with me, especially somebody that was my childhood neighbor that I truly fell in love with. And there's so many memories, right? I already talked about her giving me a set of seashell bracelet as a gift, whether it's handmade or fake. I don't remember. The the memory of us walking together in the rain, or her passing me in the rain, skipping by, her giggling under her breath, me giving her a Valentine, the fact we both had the same, private piano teacher. For her mom's 40th birthday was hosted at my house. This is in middle school, and I was, like I mentioned before, I was repelled from talking to her because I felt like as if with that extra barrier of us being childhood neighbors, it was kind of hard. And I kind of hung out with her younger brother, so to speak, just the nature of biology wanting to talk to somebody of the same sex. But the other thing I was concerned about too was if I did try to approach and talk to her, it might have given her the impression that I was trying to hit on her or something. And I didn't want that. Um, and I was obviously extra shy, but yeah, you can tell that this is an important person in my life, and people might say, just forget about her, move on. You have to understand something. I have nothing. The only thing I have are the fond memories of her and the comforting times I had eighth grade, ninth grade, and the first quarter of my sophomore year. That's all that I have to cling on to. And yeah, it's just so much shit has transpired. It's absolutely just, it's crazy to think about. And again, the fact that I'm even making this video now or talking about these things, I'm able to hold on to them for so long, might have something to do with me having Aspergers, or the way in which I think about things, the way in which I process everything, mental health, so on and so forth. But as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, this is just a digital chronicle. Because what if I lose all of this? What if I have some sort of, as an example, my paternal grandmother, she died in 2006 from Alzheimer's. She lost her memory. Her motor skills failed. She could barely go up a set of stairs. She was struggling to walk. She was struggling to breathe. That could happen to me one day. And just being able to archive this so I can go back and look at it and say, you know what? No one can take this away from me, ever. That is what's important to me right now. And yeah, this is, I know, a long fucking ramble, a long rant. Not rant, but I just need to get this shit off my chest. And so, for the final topic, as you can tell, I will be seeking therapy about all of this. And this isn't going to be something that I'll be done with in one session. This isn't a fucking problem to fix, so to speak. It's coming to terms with my childhood neighbor. As I said, I don't know if I can ever forgive myself because I used to be on good terms with her and I ruined it like an idiot. And it's obviously too late to go back and change things. Married, has kids. I don't ever want to fuck with her um, life ever again. I haven't told my mom this or whatever. I don't ever plan on doing so because if she did, she would try to get her involved. And that's the last thing both of us need. Um, but yeah, I'm going to be talking. Hopefully, I have to sign with this full-time job I have. I need to enroll into a healthcare plan because if I do that, insurance will cover the cost of, seeing a therapist. It'll be a lot cheaper. Because if I were to try to do it with the state coverage right now, I'd probably be paying like $200 a session. And if I were to try to do that on a weekly basis, that'd eat up all of my fucking income. So get some health care. seek professional help to deal with this shit. But this is what's been going, all of this that I've explained has been what's going through my mind, as I've been trying to commentate on videos and obsessing over the details, wishing I could go back, have that one-on-two conversation with her and her best friend, tell them how I genuinely felt, just have the courage to simply fucking talk, wishing I could go back and do that. Wish I can go back into the past and right all my wrongs for all the transgressions that I went through. So much shit has transpired. So much in my personal life. And as I said, no matter how bad things have been, even though I feel like contextually speaking, I've been dead for most of my life, I am not going to turn into the person I told you that killed himself. Bright and brilliant academic prodigy, great personality, the person I went to a private school with. I am not going to turn into that person. But I want to be able to get closure in my life and be at peace with myself. And I do believe an instrumental part of that is coming to terms with this, coming to terms with her, and also getting a job in the field. Because as I said, I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do with my life. It felt like I was just being fed through a funnel and just, go to some public or private university and you take out tens, if not tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 in student loans. I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do, right? I wish I could just go back in time and with the knowledge that I have now and just save myself 10 years of my life, because that's kind of what I've done with my lack of action. I've postponed, I've delayed personal growth and where I want to be career-wise by 10 years. But that's the thing. I've struggled with this shit for so long. As I mentioned, getting my degree last May, 9 months ago, that was a personal demon I fucking slew. And it may be only an associate's, but it's better than not having a degree at all. And I do know for a fact there are going to be jobs that will say you need to have a bachelor's as a requirement, even if the actual job itself, even if you have the experience necessary, without that qualification, you're instantly disqualified. It's unfortunate. It's a cruel world that we live in, that there is a barrier that says you need to have this piece of paper, otherwise you will not be able to move forward. I'm hoping and I am confident that I will be able to get something before May of next year, 2025, because that's when my bachelor's degree counterpart would have graduated. And if I can get something before then, I can just ride with it. It's, to me, life is not about getting a bachelor's degree at 22, landing a high paying job immediately after graduating in a field that pays a ton of money. It's about your character. It's about who you are as a person and maybe this perceived legacy that you want to leave behind. If I can leave a digital footprint and leave smiles on people's faces just with the content that I produce here on YouTube and maybe throughout my digital, not just here on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, leaving an online footprint, but I think that's what's most important to me. It's just being at peace with who I am as a person, because working the jobs that I am now, being a fucking stock boy at 2 different places, I know for a fact I'm overqualified. But I do believe if I just get off my ass and constantly apply 7 jobs, we're talking an hour of my precious free time, which I have all the time in the world, I'm confident I'll be able to get something. But yeah, getting to that point of contentment, getting a job in the field, saving up some money for an emergency fund, even having like a cat as a companion for moral support, because my association will allow that. Then I feel like I'll be back on track, because right now I've kind of shut out my family, my parents, my siblings. And being honest with my siblings, I talked about kind of my philosophy with life. And maybe this has something to do with my autism, my way of thinking, my social norms for society. I feel like as of my siblings, my older sister, who's nearly 2 years older than me, and my older brother, who's nearly 9 years older than me, I'm the youngest child. To me, they've always felt like fucking roommates. That's really, I mean, dead serious, sincere. It's just, family, and it doesn't mean just regular, but extended family too, will treat each other like shit behind closed doors, but then in public, they act differently. If you acted the same way behind closed doors with other people that weren't family, friends of the family, or just acquaintances, you would disassociate from them altogether, right? You wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. You would cut ties, you'd sever them. But because family, because people are bound by blood, they can unconditionally forgive each other. They can treat each other like shit, and they can just say, well, we're family. It's okay if we treat each other like garbage. I just find that ideologically inconsistent, and I just feel like as if it's just two-faced. Because people put on and it's not just family, but people put on appearances publicly, but then in their private lives, they behave differently. And that's something I don't want to do. I want to be the same person who I am in public versus who I am in private. And in terms of my personality, I prefer to be the person that's behind the magic curtain, just like in The Wizard of Oz. I don't like being thrust into the spotlight unless I'm absolutely forced to. I'd rather just make my mark, um, but in the shadows. That's the best way I would describe it. Um, but yeah, I know I've been at this for over an hour. These are my thoughts. This is the shit that's taken place for so long. And I'm surprised I didn't shed a tear or anything like that, because trust me, it is it's extremely painful for me. It may not seem like it, but I just got to get this out there. And yeah, all I can say is if you've watched to the end of this video, thanks for listening for what I had to say, because it's a lot. And I'm hoping one day that I will be able to forgive myself in regards to hurting this person, my neighbor, because yeah, it's just, again, even though I apologize to her, I feel like I fractured the relationship I once had, and I wish I could go back in time and just be on good terms with her, because those people I mentioned that I was close to, Brendan, Laura, Michaela, Melanie, Rita, right? People inevitably drift away, once high school, is over. Drifting away on good terms with somebody is not the same thing as drifting away at someone with neutral terms. My neighbor might even have some slight disdain for me, but drifting away from someone like that, who I used to be on good terms, if not great terms with, it's very painful, and it sucks that I could even call her up and have a conversation. It just blows. And I really wish I could just go back in time and have that conversation with her and her best friend. And be on good terms. That's the one thing I would change. And obviously with the mindset I have now, just be humble and use my life experience, not let my egotism get in the way. But all right. Well, with that being said, thanks for listening. And again, I appreciate each and every one of you that has left a comment on my videos and has given me some sort of moral support, because it's a slight reminder that I am good enough for people. It reminds me of those days, those 2 years of my life, September 2005 to mid-October 2007. And I'm hoping I can get back to that point. And I believe I will one day. It's going to take quite a fucking while. I feel like I've climbed the steepest part of the mountain. Now I just need to climb down and finish that journey. And I know that some of my viewers who may be listening to this, I've known some of you for over a decade, 10 years. I've never talked about this stuff before, but especially the people who are here on YouTube who've known me for so long. Thank you to those as well. It's very comforting. As I said, just being able to put a smile on people's faces and knowing that I'm making a slight positive impact. If you had a shitty day at work, you come back, you wind down, you watch a video to get away from it all. That's good enough for me. Finding purpose in life. And obviously this is something, creating these AI battles mostly, putting these videos up on YouTube as a hobby. It's comforting. But yeah, with that being said then, thanks for listening to my story, to my archive. And yeah, we'll resume videos as normal. It's just I kind of feel somewhat glad that I'm just getting this all off my chest now. It doesn't mean it's going to go away, but it's my way of being able to say, not necessarily help, but it's my way of being able to just say, I have issues. Here are some highlights as to what they are. And yeah, it's just my way of being able to say thanks for understanding. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna get going then, and I will see you guys and gals for today's video later. I'm gonna get this uploaded immediately. It's 2:30 in the morning, and just kind of move on. Um, Thanks for listening, and take care until next video.